Good morning and welcome. My name is Brandon Laws. I'm the Director of Marketing at Zenim HR. Today's webinar topic is key strategies to taking the difficult out of difficult conversations, and this is presented by Barry Crowning of Crowning Communications. So before we get started, we're going to do a little housekeeping. Wanted to let you know this is a 30-minute presentation. Barry will go from about 10 to about 10:30, 10:35-ish, and then we'll do about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A on the back end. So if you have questions for Barry throughout the presentations, feel free to go to the question box located on the GoToWebinar panel, and then you can enter questions throughout the presentation. So feel free, as something just hits you, enter something right away, and I'll be monitoring those as the presentation goes on. And then during the session, the Q&A session, we'll actually go over the questions, and Barry will answer those. Another thing to note is the slides and recording will be available to attendees. So if for some odd reason you get disconnected or you're not able to stay the entire time, the slides and recording will be sent out, and typically about 24 to 48 hours after. And then if you want to get alerts and event notifications about webinars or other content, feel free to go to our website at www.zenimhr.com. Scroll about halfway down on the homepage and you can enter your email address. So webinar alerts, live workshops, those sort of things, you would be kind of the first to know about those. So I'm going to do a little introduction for Barry, and then I'll turn it over to her. Barry Crowning is a leadership development and conflict management coach and consultant based in Portland, Oregon, and she works with clients all over the world. Barry has a unique set of analytical and people skills she offers her clients based on her background in law and human resources. She has extensive international experience in coaching, facilitation, and training across various industries. Barry specializes in working with emerging leaders in global settings in North and South America and helps them rehumanize the workplace, build dynamic relationships, and communicate effectively when the stakes are high. Barry lives in Portland, Oregon. After living in the Netherlands for 30 years, she's passionate about the outdoors and spends a lot of her time enjoying everything the wilderness has to offer. She often is skiing on Mount Hood and hiking with her family in the Portland area. Barry, it's all you know.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Brandon.
You're welcome.
And thank you to Zenim HR for hosting this webinar today. And welcome to all listeners here today. So the bad news about difficult conversations is that they will always be difficult. The good news is that we can learn skills, you can learn skills and strategies that can make you feel more comfortable, and you'll have better results with difficult conversations. And from my own experience in life, I know that, and you probably know this too, that difficult conversations are a part of healthy relationships. It's really like, how well do you do difficult conversations? Kind of reflects how healthy you are in your work relationships. What I was struggling most with, because this is kind of a lifelong practice, is learning how to do a difficult conversation. What I was struggling most with was speaking up, having the courage to bring up something that was important to me, but really afraid that I would hurt the other person. So you might be able to relate to that. Have you ever thought about a conversation that you don't want to have in that moment? You don't know how to do it, or you're so angry and frustrated in the moment that you're afraid that nothing good will come out of it. So I realized I have a few choices when I think about my conversations and how difficult they are. I can either avoid them, I can mess them up, or I can become better in it. So that's what I would like to share with you, some strategies that I have used to become better in having these really tough conversations. As I was preparing this presentation today, I thought back of my very first job and my very first difficult conversation. I was right out of law school, and I was working as an agent in a temp agency because I wanted to go into human resources, and that was kind of the route to go at that time. And Anyway, so I sent out this employee, and one of my clients that I sent this employee to called me and said, you know, this is a person with a strong body odor, and it's kind of offensive in the office, and I had to bring that up with you know, the employee client. And at 22, I had no idea how to handle that. And as Dutch and direct as I am, I asked the temp employee, are you actually using deodorant? Because we received complaints that you smell too sweaty. Anyway, that didn't go over well, as you can imagine. And I've learned a lot since then. So I know you have your own examples of difficult conversations. It might be a disagreement with your boss, or you've been denied a promotion. There might be bad news conversations. During my years in human resources, I had to lay off a lot of people, which every time was a very, very difficult conversation for me. We might need to be we might need to address workplace inappropriate behaviors, things like that. And it gets especially difficult when it's with coworkers that you actually have befriended. So there's a lot of reasons what makes something a difficult conversation. So today I want to explore with you what exactly makes a conversation difficult conversation, which we just talked a little bit about. I would like to talk about how to decide if we actually want to have that difficult conversation or let it go, because not every difficult conversation has to take place, right? And then I would like to go into strategies on how to conduct an effective and satisfying difficult conversation with confidence and with the desired results that you want to get out of it. And so I'll give you my 5 strategies on how to be successful in that. So let's first look at what makes it really difficult. When I ask this question in my workshops, in my live workshops, I often get answers like, I'm afraid I'll hurt the other person's feelings. I don't know if I can trust the other person to understand me. I want to avoid conflict. People are afraid that a difficult conversation turns into a conflict or into kind of a blaming or shouting match. We don't know how the person is going to react. Maybe they may become violent. I've been in situations where I was laying off people that I was really afraid that I would get a violent response. So there are many ways how conversations can be difficult. It might be something that we really believe in and that we know that the other person is disagreeing on, some things like that. And we might feel really, really vulnerable going into the conversation to start with. So when you think of your own conversation, your own difficult moments, what are some of the things that are going on? Well, the things that are going on, the most important things that are going on are actually not visible. Well, when you look at this iceberg, you see the tip of the iceberg. You see there's at least 50% or 60% under the surface that we can't really see. But we have a sense of it. But we see the tip of the iceberg and we pay attention to that. That's the issue. That's the issue that we need to bring up. And I want you to see every difficult conversation as a curious conversation. Be curious what's going on under the surface, because that's really where the action is in a difficult conversation. And we never know the whole story. We go into a difficult conversation thinking, okay, yeah, I understand this person, I understand the issue, I know what's going on, but we never know the whole story. So I want to invite you to be curious and to dig a little deeper. So let's look at what could be going on below that surface that we want to explore. So there is a whole bunch of things that's actually going on. Some of them are about our perceptions. How do I perceive what the other person is saying or doing? It's about interpretations. What are the assumptions that I'm making? Or what are the assumptions that the other person is making? What story do I make up about the other person? It's usually a story, because we never know the whole story until we really dig deeper with the other person. It's about values. How are my values challenged? And which values are challenged in this situation? We often don't really think about that. And you know, it might actually be the same value that's challenged for the other person. Then we look at feelings. There's a really difficult conversations are all about feelings. And this sounds really weird because it's a workplace seminar, yet we bring our feelings to work. And we might not express them in that way, but we do have our emotions and our feelings. So consider your own difficult conversation. What were you feeling? Hurt, shame, anger, frustration? Did you feel safe or unsafe in that difficult conversation? See, those are all feelings. And then, of course, there's the identity issue. It's like, I am the boss, or I am the troublemaker in the team, or I am the glue in the team. So there's this identity that is challenged in a difficult conversation. What am I saying about myself, to myself, about me? So in order to become more confident in difficult conversations, you want to develop the awareness around some of these issues. And you can do that by just really asking yourself these questions that I just asked you. Look at your own judgments, your perspectives, your emotional responses, your values, and also your communication style in conflict. So people that are effective at having these difficult conversations, what I notice is they know what is going on for them. And they're curious what's going on for them and for the other person. So make the difficult conversation a curious conversation. That's already a big step forward. And you know, people that are really good and effective in difficult conversations generally pay attention to the other person. Often it's the gap between what we're feeling and thinking and what we're saying. So what we're feeling and thinking under the surface and what we're actually saying, that's often what makes it a difficult conversation. So I want to acknowledge here that you don't need to have every difficult conversation. Not every difficult conversation needs to take place. I just want to make sure that we know that. So let's see how we assess that. When do you confront or not confront another person? So in deciding whether you want to proceed with a difficult conversation, there's some things that you can consider. I always ask myself 5 questions that are really helping me see if this is a conversation I want to spend my energy on and my emotional energy and efforts. I ask myself, is this person important to me? Is this relationship important to me? Has this happened before? Does this bother me or other people? And can I invest my time? So it's really looking at, is this relationship, is it worth it to have this conversation? If I answer no to all these questions, I'm not going to have that difficult conversation. But if I answer yes, and the relationship and the issue are so important to me that I really want to invest my time and effort, and also invest have the other person invest some time in it, then I'll have this difficult conversation. And let's look at some of the strategies that how we're going to do that effectively. A difficult conversation is a dynamic process with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this first strategy of making it safe is a strategy that we mostly apply in the beginning or even before we start the difficult conversation. In one of my HR jobs, I used to work with someone whom I had many difficult conversations with because we had very different perspectives, very different goals. We felt somewhat competitive towards each other because I was actually replacing her in her job and she was moving on. And so that was a very kind of inequality in our roles. And so whenever something went wrong between us, my coworker pulled me into this little conference room off the side. And the door of the conference room had a window and it was looking out into our HR office. So everyone that stepped into the office knew and could see and hear that we were in there having this difficult conversation, and I can tell you that I never felt safe in there. So here are some things that we could have done differently to make it safe. We could have thought better about our timing. If I am very emotional, that's probably not a good time to start a difficult conversation. And also check if it's a good time with the other person, if they're not going into a very important meeting, right? And so then they don't have the space to listen or to have this conversation. This is a little bit more challenging when the conversation turns into a difficult conversation on the spot. That's happening too, of course. You still have to manage your emotions though in that moment, and so timing, it might be a better timing to say, let's postpone this now and let's come back to it when we both are calmer or when we both can think about it a little bit more. Obviously, location is very important. You want to choose a neutral location that feels safe to both of you, to be quiet and confidential, somewhere where you cannot be disturbed by other people, by interrupted. You want to build trust. Make it safe is about building trust, having open body language, have your arms relaxed, maybe your hands in your lap or open on the table, have eye contact with the other person, and build trust by taking ownership of your feelings and your actions. When you are thinking about going into a difficult conversation, think about who is your audience. What are they bringing in? Are they insecure? Maybe they're your direct report. Maybe they're your boss. Think about how would you respond if someone would come to you and you are their boss and they have some feedback for you. So step into the other person's shoes for a moment and realize, okay, what problems could they bring in? What emotions could they bring in? In making it safe, you also want to slow down and be patient with yourself and with the other person, and be aware of the emotions that you bring in, because anger feeds anger. Another aspect of this strategy is making it safe is your opening sentence. As I mentioned before, you want to look at each difficult conversation as a curious conversation and one that you enter with an open mind. So often people start from their own story when they open a difficult conversation, and with that they make the other person the problem. For example, I was very upset by what you said in front of our manager about me being late to the meeting, or you keep missing deadlines and that's not acceptable behavior. You have to do something about that. You know what happens when we start a conversation like that? People become defensive. It will be spiraling down. People shut down. They stop listening. They start arguing about who's right or wrong. Well, that's never goes well. So when we start our own difficult conversation from our own story, we share our version of the events. So I have a suggestion, and this is a model or a little process. It's called the SBIR statement, and it's a little bit from me. It's a little bit designed by me, and it's a little bit designed by the Center of Creative Leadership. So we both get some credit for that. And the SBIR statement is a really nice opening for any difficult conversation, for any conflict situation, for any feedback or performance review type setting. And it goes like this. So the S stands for situation. And the situation is just location and time. So it sounds like yesterday morning in our meeting. The B stands for behavior, and this is matter-of-fact, objective, observable behavior. Yesterday morning in the meeting, I heard you say this, or I saw you do that. And the I refers to impact. Share how it made you feel. How did you feel when you heard that or saw that person doing what they were doing? How did it impact you? How did it impact the team? How did it impact your coworkers? The bottom line could be impacted, for example. And then the R is the critical piece. This is the regressed. And that sounds like I would like it if we could talk about this so I can hear from you how you experience this. It's the invitation to explore each other's iceberg, really, to explore each other's reality, see what's going on under the surface. So an example of an SBR statement would sound like this. Yesterday morning in the meeting, I noticed that you started speaking before I was finished presenting my plan. And I felt frustrated because I thought you didn't think it was important what I had to say. I would like it if we can talk about this now. Very simple, very non-judgmental, making it safe. Strategy number 2 is about starting with the outcome in mind. When I ask my clients what they find most difficult, the common answer is, I don't know where to begin and I don't know how to start. So here's a good idea. Start with the end in mind. What do you want your outcome to be? Do you want to create trust? Do you want to encourage positive behavior? Do you just want to be listened to and share your feelings about a situation? How do you want the other to feel, think, or do differently as a result of the conversation? And how do you want to feel, think, or do differently as at the end of the conversation? So those are outcome-focused questions. People tend to jump into a conversation from a place of anger without realizing what they want out of it. And then you go on all these rabbit trails, and it makes us feel lost in emotions. It makes us feel lost in the topic. Often other topics come up. Things from the past will be drawn in. So before you know it, you're in a conflict. And with regards to the topics, I want to say I would stick to one topic or outcome at a time. So you have only one conversation at a time. Otherwise, you'll have like 2 or 3 conversations at a time in the same conversation. That's very confusing. And it helps to plan or prepare your conversation and think through different scenarios if that's at all possible. So we talked about strategy 1, making it safe, something that you do before you go into the conversation and right at the beginning. And then I talked about strategy 2, which refers to outcome thinking and the opening statement. And so many people shut down, get offended, or stop listening. They get angry or they lose it. And I want to share some tips on how to stay in the dialogue. Because when we are really angry and we shut down, we actually leave the dialogue. We might not physically leave it, but we certainly do. We stop listening, and we are becoming not negative or very critical. Excuse me, let's take a sip of water. So I want to share some tips on how you can manage staying in the dialogue. And that's by expressing optimism. Something like, I trust that we can work through this together. And with that, you keep the dialogue open and flexible and positive. During the dialogue, you want to listen for understanding, and you do not listen to form your answer. This is a key thing. We often listen to form our rebuttal. You really want to step into their shoes and stay present with the other person throughout the conversation. Keep listening until you understand their point of view. And share your understanding, share your perspective, so you come to mutual understanding. And mutual understanding, I just want to point out, is not the same as mutual acknowledgement or sorry, mutual agreement. So you can still acknowledge the other person's perspectives, and it doesn't mean that you agree with them. That's okay. You want to ask open-ended questions to draw the other person out, summarize what you hear, and if you need to, you can repeat this cycle. Listen, ask questions, summarize. Listen, ask questions, summarize. Look for common interests. If you feel like you are totally disagreeing with this person, look for, okay, what do we have in common, or what do I like about this person? You know, think about what you like about them. That way you can stay in the dialogue and not be swept away by your emotions. And you have to control your emotions, which brings us to strategy 4. You have to manage yourself. Look in the mirror and manage yourself. and constantly do this. You have to constantly take care of yourself, take responsibility for your own behavior, your actions, your words, your well-being. Deal with your emotions because they will deal with you. Have you ever lost it in a difficult conversation? Did you know that there's this research? It takes years for a leader to restore their credibility if they slipped once and lost it. It takes years to restore that. So self-management for leaders in organizations and for anyone actually that sees themselves as a leader, although might not be in a management job, you're still a leader in your own life. To manage yourself effectively, you have to have some awareness around what pushes your buttons, your hot buttons. And you want to practice choosing a different response that is more resourceful for you. A flexible, calm attitude helps with this. Breathing helps, so keep breathing. That's really important. Speak calmly and express your emotions without getting all worked up about it. Without displaying your anger, you can still talk about your anger and how angry you are and how frustrated you are. In this strategy, you also, excuse me, in this strategy, you also want to remind yourself that this conversation is not only about the goal, it's not only about the outcome that you want to achieve, it's also about preserving the relationship that you have with the other person and with yourself. And you do that by managing yourself. There are times, of course, that things get really rough. So what do you do then when you and the other person are really angry, it's really difficult, you have no idea where to go from there? What you can do is imagine yourself going up to second floor. Second floor, step out on the balcony and look down on yourself and the other person having this difficult dynamic in your conversation. And then you have the meta conversation. So you address the dynamic, what's going on in the moment. It sounds something like this. I notice that I am not in a place to listen to you right now. Or I notice we both say things, but we don't really hear each other. Let's explore that. What is that about? Last but not least, when the difficult conversation is coming to an end, and you want to make sure that you summarize your understanding of what you both have talked about. Summarize what you've heard the other person say, summarize what your perspective is, and if necessary, you want to schedule a follow-up. And that's good practice when there's a difficult conversation. By summarizing the understanding between you and the other person, you basically ground the clarity and you confirm the outcome that you both have reached. You can actually celebrate together. People forget that when they have a difficult conversation that ended really well and that really brought them more together. They they forget to celebrate, and that's a really beautiful element of having a difficult conversation. So the follow-up can be for that, or you can confirm you can confirm the way forward that you have agreed upon. You want to remember, of course, to do a reality check if it's really possible, which the solution that you both came up with. If there was an agreement of some sort, I recommend that you schedule this follow-up meeting. And you can then review and refine the agreement and check on, are you following through? If not, what is the problem? What is the obstacle there? And so you continue this conversation while you're staying in connection with the other person. Good, so all these strategies might not help if you don't make some important internal shifts. So that's the last thing I would like to talk about, is these 5 important internal shifts. Let's go through them one by one. You want to make a shift, shift the focus from me to you. What is going on for you? How do you see this? I listen to you. I ask you questions. What is your reality like? This is a crucial shift, and it's a shift from I understand to help me understand. It's a very different way of entering into a difficult conversation. The second shift is a shift from away to forward. When we focus on what we don't want, we often end up with what we don't want. I always have the feeling if I keep saying, I don't want this, I don't want to be fired, I don't want to be talking with this person. If every time I say I don't want, I take a step back and I end up with my back to the wall without any opportunities or options or choices left. So I would like to have you make the shift from the shift from away to toward. Away is what I don't want, and toward is going towards what I do want. There's always a do want opposite a don't want. And sometimes it's hard to find, but it's really, there's always one. And when you communicate into a want, you communicate positively and you're outcome focused. And that's what we want here. Change your yes buts or no buts into yes ands. That's a shift. It's a very subtle one. No but or yes but is a negative statement that doesn't open up for new perspectives and solutions. It really separates the two people that are talking with each other. It separates the ideas. It separates the solution. If someone comes with a solution and you say, yes, but, then that solution is already off the table almost, just by that statement. If you switch to yes and, however, then you connect the ideas and the perspectives that the other person is saying, and you connect people by listening to them, and you connect your ideas with their ideas. And that opens up to a lot of new opportunities and possibilities. The fourth one is that you want to make a shift from certainty to curiosity. What do I mean with that? When you move from certainty of what you know to be true and certainty that you are right, you move, and when you can move to curiosity, you open up for the other person's ideas and you open up for other options. I also would like to invite you to be curious about what you don't know about yourself. That has to do with that little iceberg exploration. Be curious about what you don't know about yourself and what you can learn in this, because every difficult conversation is a learning experience. So to conclude, the last shift that I suggest that you make is from right, wrong to exploring. It's a shift from the idea that a difficult conversation is always about who's right or wrong. And I think you've heard me say this before, but it's really shifting to a more open, exploring mindset. That's really what difficult conversations are about. It's what conflict resolution is about, is exploring each other's reality with respect and openness. So I've talked with you about 5 strategies to taking the difficult out of difficult conversations. You start by making it safe, have outcome-minded thinking, stay in the dialogue while you are managing yourself, and at the end, you are summarizing the understanding and scheduling a follow-up. And I know this was a lot of information in a short time. So in the next couple of days, as Brandon said, we will follow up with you by email to hear if you have any questions. And I will send you some more resources on the topic because there's a lot of information out there. And I want you to send you the best resources that I know of. And I'll also make sure that you'll get a transcript of this session as well as the slides. So before we go into the Q&A with Brandon, I would like to close this part of the session with a quote from Douglas Stone, the author of the book titled Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. It's a wonderful book and I wholeheartedly recommend it. He says, simply by changing your own behavior, you gain at least some influence over the problem. So good luck with your difficult conversations. Thank you so much for being on the webinar. Don't leave yet. We're going to do some Q&A, and I'm turning it over to Brandon for that.
Wonderful, Barry. Thank you so much. So before we jump into the Q&A, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give people a sense for where they can contact you. I know you have some contact information on the slide there, uh, but as far as like your website or other resources that are a really good tie-in to this conversation, where could those the attendees go to find more about your work?
Yeah, so my website is a good resource. I actually have a tab of resources over there. My website is crowningcommunications.com. And again, I will send out some information there's a nice report on my website. It's free, and it's called 10 Tips for Turning Conflict into Conversation. This is along the same line because conflict also, of course, is a difficult conversation. So people might also get some more ideas from that report as well. And that's just on my homepage. They can just sign up for that.
Fantastic, thank you. So I just want to mention real quick, we do have a lot of questions, but we are recording this and we will send the transcript, so we'll follow up those resources later. So Barry, first question, and this actually came from a couple of people. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned the 5 questions that you stated. Could you repeat those for the group real quick?
I can. I'd love to. So the 5 questions are, is this person important to me? Is this relationship important to me? Has this happened before? Does this bother me or other people? And can I invest my time? So what we really ask ourselves is the relationship, is it worth my time, and is the issue worth my time? So I always give the examples when somebody's tailgating me, or not, I don't know if that's the right word. Somebody's like really on my bumper on the highway, and it used to be a hot button for me, and I got all worked up and angry and starting to act out, and well, that's not a good place to do that, obviously. Was it worth it? No, because the person is not important to me. The relationship, I don't have a relationship with this person. Doesn't bother me. It did bother me at that time, but I didn't want to invest my time. So these are good questions to see, is it really important to confront this or not?
Perfect. So we actually had a question in regards to that fifth point that you made. Can I invest my time? Do you really mean that literally do I have to spend the time on the conversation, or is it really just in the ramifications and then follow up regarding that conversation in general? I mean, you mentioned like the relationship piece and whatnot. So how can you just pull a thread on that? Can I invest my time just a little bit more?
Yeah, can I invest my time? What I often hear in my life workshops is people say, I don't have time for this. To sit down with someone, to have this difficult conversation, to go under the surface and to do all that. And that's, if people feel that way, that might, that might be an issue. Because if the relationship is important and the issue is important and we feel that we don't have the time, then the relationship will go south and the issue will become bigger. So I think the question really relates to, can I invest my time with regards to this person and the relationship and with regards to the issue? Does that help?
That's perfect. We had a question from Sarah, and this is in regards to having forced conversations. So she asks, how do you approach difficult conversations that you're forced to have? So in other words, you've been given a directive from somebody else, maybe higher up, and you've sort of had this debate maybe internally and with the senior person, and the decision's made
Hmm.
that you need to actually have that difficult conversation. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that would be the same, really the same process, and I really would like to encourage people to go under the surface and to do their own iceberg work in basically before they start having this difficult conversation. Really think about what is challenged for you. What are the challenges in my value? Where are my values challenged? Where are my perceptions challenged? what piece of my identity is challenged. It might be a piece of the identity when we are told to do something very difficult. And again, I would really like people to make the shift from thinking about it as a difficult conversation to really looking at this is a learning opportunity. Even if I'm told to do something, I see it as a learning opportunity. There's a reason why I've been told or asked to do this really challenging thing. There's a reason. There's something for me there to learn. So open up to the learning, open up to the curiosity. And I think that shift will already really help you to move into a successful, difficult conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, just because it's never super comfortable, especially when you're kind of first having those difficult conversations, and I think you can grow from it. So I think it's a good distinction. So
Mhm.
Chris, we have a question for Chris. He asks, what do you do when somebody doesn't want to engage in the difficult conversation? So maybe you can't get their attention or whatnot. So what do you say to that question from Chris?
Yeah, so when someone doesn't want to engage in a conversation, there's many reasons for that, obviously. And I think I would like to go back to strategy one is to make it safe for this person to engage in a conversation. I really think that if we find common ground, if we find some things that we have in common, maybe even on a personal level, and I know this is workplace related, but even in the workplace, we share some things about our family or about our hobbies. So making it safe is about establishing rapport. And when someone doesn't want to engage, it's really important to find out why that is. Are they afraid of something? Maybe they don't have time. Maybe they don't feel comfortable in the environment. Maybe they don't feel comfortable with just having the conversation with you or with that just one person there. Maybe they want someone else there. So it's important to work on making it safe and establish rapport either by first having a little bit of a casual conversation before we get into the difficult conversation to help someone pull in. Another way to make it safe is really through body language and to mirror some of the body language that's going on for the other person. So that is a very and also turn your body towards the body of the other person. So there is this rapport. It's kind of that's an energetic thing, but it's a nonverbal rapport that you're establishing that makes people feel safe and connected with you. So play a little bit with that first strategy. I would say.
That's great. So we have time for just two more questions. We have a question from Lisa. She asks, and this is in regards to bosses having really good relationships or really trying to be friends with their employees. So she asks, how would you suggest handling a difficult conversation that is immediately derailed by their boss who wants to be friends with his employees? So in a situation where it may be a serious situation, they're forced to have a difficult conversation, but they sort of muddle the dialogue based on they're trying to be friends with the person.
Hmm. So this is about the other person's behavior. It sounds like it. I'm not sure if I quite get the the issue, the question.
It really just sounds like if this boss has a hard time having a difficult conversation because they're trying to
Hmm.
be friends and keep a deep relationship. Um, how what should the person do? I think is the
Okay.
question.
Yeah, I think I really like transparency, and transparency means really having that meta conversation about the dynamic between you two. So I know something like I noticed that I sense that you're not saying everything you want to say, or I sense there's something that's not being said. What is it? Or because a boss that is maybe want to be friendly, they might not say what they really need to say. They might not be honest. So another part is to really model the behavior that you want the other person um, to do. So if you want the other person to really be honest and direct, model honesty and directness. And And I think my most important, or the most important thing that comes up for me is transparency. Just address it.
Mhm.
Just address the dynamic that's going on and see, hey, what can we do about this? I feel like I'm not getting the feedback that I really need to hear because of our friendly relationship or something like that.
Perfect. I think that's great. So last question, and this comes from Stephanie. How do you handle being on the other side of the difficult conversation? So if somebody is initiating that difficult conversation with you, uh, how should you be receptive of that? Are there some tips that you can provide when you're on the receiving end?
Yeah, I think it's really not very different than what we just talked about. This is for both parties, all these strategies. And I think listening is really important, is really hearing. And yeah, you can go under the surface with doing the iceberg work together, go check out values, check out perceptions, check out interpretations. So I'm thinking this person might ask, okay, what if I am the receiver of, let's say, critical feedback, or yeah, some critical notes there. Be open and be curious also. And this is also curious. And often critical feedback is a gift. We might not see that in the moment, but feedback really is a gift in many ways. And unwrap it, unwrap the gift together, and by asking questions, listen, summarize, and stay in the dialogue. So I don't think it's really very different than what we've just talked about. The strategies are applicable to anyone in a difficult conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Barry. So on the last slide, if you would be so kind as to forward it along, we have some contact information for you. So if you need to reach out to us, reach out to Barry, reach out to me. Our email addresses are listed on the right side of the screen there. And as always, if you're looking for content, either from Xenium in terms of articles, white papers, we have podcasts, or even the webinar recordings. We always post those on the website, so those are the resources on the screen. And as Barry mentioned earlier, she has a lot of great resources. She does a lot of workshops as well. At crowningcommunications.com is where you can find all that information. And we will follow up with the slides and recording in about 24 to 48 hours. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Barry, as always, great job, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me,
It's a
Brandon.
lot of fun.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it.
All right, well, have a great day, everybody.